I love a good deep dive video. It's what got me interested in doing these to begin with. A couple years ago, I had never even really heard of a Shin Megami Tensei game. I had seen a little bit of Persona, but I wasn't really interested in dropping all those crazy, daunting hours into it. I just didn't really have time, and there's a lot of other games I wanted to get to. Now, let's fast forward a few years, and I'm not sure I can get enough of Persona. I started with Persona 5 Royal, and I've been hooked ever since, and I'm looking forward to my first SMT game. Just recently, I started watching a lot of lore videos, and I've been making my own little connections in my head, and I noticed something. There wasn't very many of these talking about the connections between the Mecha 10 games and Lovecraft. Some names stood out right away for me, while a few others took a little while for me to make the connections. And before we get too far, I will point out that I believe that there's a big group of people who are saying we shouldn't even talk about him due to his repulsive beliefs, but that's not what this video is about. I'm a big fan of the surrounding mythos and all of the works created by HPL's peers in his universe. A quick recommendation before we get started: if you've never read Red Goat, Black Goat by Nadika Bulkin, then you really should change that. Alright, so here are the 5 connections between the game series and HPL. Now, I mentioned another one right in the first section, but I have a few criteria for this top 5. I really want something that isn't too easy to find, and you'll see why I passed up the first run right away, and it's probably the most noticeable one as well. There is so many videos about the lore of these games and all different personas you can acquire, so I wanted to make sure I found ones that weren't talked about enough. Yes, I am aware this isn't the strongest criteria, but it's going to have to do. Starting up, we are jumping right into Persona 5, specifically Persona 5 Royal. One of the more complex characters, and in my opinion, one of the more interesting character arcs in the game, is that of Futaba. Her first persona is Necronomicon. Yes, this is tied to Lovecraft, but it's way too easy to start there, and we wouldn't have to talk specifically about Royal. In the expansion of the 3rd semester, you can unlock a 3rd tier of personas for your party, and Futaba ends up with Al-azif. In 1938, after the death of Lovecraft, there was a history of the Necronomicon, written by him prior and published after his death. We get the name of that persona from that book. Al-azif is the Arabic name for the Necronomicon, written by a character known as the Mad Arab Abdul Al-Hazred. Now, this is a demon not seen in the Persona games. Bast is much more common in the SMT main series as well as in the Last Bible 3 and Devil Children. There is a significant history to this character, and yes, it does go beyond that of Lovecraft, but it still has some ties, though less strong of that of Al-azif. There's another name for Bast, just shortened to Bast, and they are an Egyptian god. In fact, they are the queen of all cats. Read enough Lovecraft, and you can tell that he was a fan of cats. Bast was hinted at being part of the Elder Gods in his work, specifically in the short story, The Cats of Ulthar. Those only hinted at later, Bast was put firmly into the mythos by the work of Robert Bloch. Bloch was not just a fan of HPL. He was a contributor of Weird Tales, a Hugo Award winner, and was specifically mentored by Lovecraft himself. Bayaki, I think is the name. Lovecraftian mythos and Persona 5 Royal are going hand in hand with some of these. Not intentional, though it is my favorite in the whole series. That lovely third semester again, we get introduced to some new enemies, which I was kind of meh about the design, but the name stood out to me and it took a long time to figure out exactly why. Found in Maruki's palace, these weird-looking winged demons is actually based on the servants of Hastur, the King in Yellow. They are winged creatures not usually found on Earth, but they can be found in the Nameless City. Persona 5 Royal is not the first appearance of them, but they show up all the way back in Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. I really want to play this game. I haven't had a chance yet, but the PSP remake of Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. I don't know a lot about his involvement in the story, but what little I can find, he got a minor role, but he's still there. Swami... Oh, I'm so gonna butcher this. Chandraputra? Oh, awful. Is an alias of Randolph Carter. HPL talked a lot about Carter being trapped in that body through his story through the gates of the Silver Key. Carter is one of the most used characters in HPL's work, and is basically a stand-in for Lovecraft himself. He managed to have both similar taste and physical appearance of the author himself. As a side note, not the only media that uses Carter long after the death of HPL. But a descendant is a main character in the book series Carter and Lovecraft, which I have done a mini review of. The most common one on this whole list is the one being shown last. Not that it's an exhaustive list of all the Lovecraftian connections, but Kaiwan appears 9 times in the mainline and Persona series. This one is a different beast altogether due to how you decide to look at the name. The first is an old Arabic name used for the planet Saturn and was eventually called the Star of Saturn by the Romans. On the other hand, there's another attachment for that name, and since this is not a video about planets, it is much more interesting information. One of my favorite characters in all Lovecraftian fiction is that of Hastur. Kaiwan is one of the alternate names of the King in Yellow and was way before Voldemort started being known as He Who Is Not to Be Named. I find that a lot of people have no idea who this is. In short, Lovecraft fell in love with a book called The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers and decided to bring him into the fold of his mythos. Eventually, with the contributions of others, Hastur is firmly put among the likes of his half-brother Cthulhu and the pantheon of great old ones. Alright, top 5 is a bit of a shit title for this, but frankly, how many people would want to click on a video called 5 Lovecraftian connections to SMT and Persona that I feel like talking about because I find them cool, and I hope you will too. But there we go. I'm aware there's a lot I haven't talked about, and if you feel like I've really overlooked one, please let me know, and maybe we can do a follow-up. Seriously, I know I miss stuff because these games are so expansive, and I'm learning more and more about them every day. Thank you for watching. Much love. Bye now.